Good evening. Hopefully y'all can hear me. This is Toy, and I'm going to give everybody just a couple of more minutes to come in, and then we'll get started. I hope everyone is doing well. We're going to get started in like 2 minutes. I just wanted to make sure we had several people to request entrance into the group. So just wanted to make sure that we allowed them time to hop on. But thank you for those of you that have joined. And Soros, while you're waiting, why don't you go ahead just in the chat, just say where you're from. Awesome. It looks like we've got somebody from Louisiana. Awesome. It looks like we've got somebody from Louisiana. Sorry, y'all. Awesome. And we've got someone from North Carolina. So, oh, actually two. Awesome. All right, let's get going. And feel free to share with any of the sorors that you know might want to attend. This will be recorded on Facebook, so they will be able to see this at a later date. So let's get started. All right, we are going to talk about budgets tonight. Um, and if you didn't know, my name is Toy. I'm Toy Thurman, and I'm running for International Tammys of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. And I'm happy to be here tonight with all of you. On this screen, basically, I have included just a brief little history about myself. I even included my LinkedIn profile, so be sure to link up with me. And then also I've included a link to a QR code for my website with any information that you wanted to know about me. All right. So let's go right in and we're gonna just talk about the why, the who, the what, the when, the how of budgeting. And one thing I'll tell you when I was going through and doing this is that I was like, this is quite a bit, and I felt like I still didn't get enough in. So I'm thinking about a part two, but not today. All right. So let's just go right in. Why do you need to budget? And I would think that y'all would know why we would need to budget, but hey, we want to make sure that that everybody's in the know. So I include a quote here, and I know y'all are probably familiar with it. It says, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And that's from Benjamin Franklin. And that's what we want to do as an organization. We want to make sure that we plan appropriately. That's the responsible thing to do. And so when it comes to a budget, it's a clear, organized financial plan that supports chapter stability for long-term success. So, when Zeta was set up in January 16th, 1920, we just recently celebrated that. It was set up. I'm sure the founders had no idea we'd still be going this long, but obviously that they wanted us to go on this long. And in order for us to do that, we have to have a strategy, right? We have to have a plan for doing that. And part of that is having a plan for your money. And so you can see on this screen, we've included a few bullets in regards to why you want to make sure that you plan, why you want to make sure that you budget. All right, the first slide, it talks about ensuring financial accountability. It says budgets help to track income and expenses, preventing overspending and ensuring transparency. So if you've already assigned that you're only going to spend, say, $1,000 on publicity, right? You may want to support various Divine Nine organizations around in your community. If another one pops up that you didn't budget for it, then you probably can't support that organization or you need to find money for that. That helps you to make sure that you do not overspend. Also, you want to ensure transparency. Part of the budgeting process is making sure that you're transparent to those that are involved. And in this case, this will be the members of the organization, the SOARs in the organization. You want to make sure as part of your budgeting process that you're very transparent in regards to what goes into that budget, because at the end of the day, it's going to cost them. It costs them in their membership dues, so that they should be very comfortable in the information that you're providing. Therefore, you should be very transparent about what's going to be in that budget, and therefore go into the calculation of their annual membership dues. Oops, sorry. Too quick. So the next one is that it supports goal planning. So chapters should, if you're not doing this, is probably something that you may want to speak to your president about, is that chapters should have, various initiatives. Obviously, many of them come down from our international organization, and then that should basically cascade down to the local chapters, and the local president should determine what your chapter's initiatives, events, and what the strategic priorities are going to be in your community. And so part of that is actually knowing the dollars that are associated with those particular projects. And so having a budgeted process helps to support any goal planning that your chapter might be doing. It doesn't make sense to plan everything and then you don't know how much it's going to cost. Therefore, you don't know how much you need to ask of your chapter members, or maybe some sort of fundraising initiative, or maybe an application for a grant. You need to make sure that you understand what the cost is for any initiatives that you have planned for the upcoming year. it improves your decision-making process. So if you're well informed on where your chapter stands, or if the president is well informed, the leaders are well informed, the chapter members are well informed, then you'll know what's possible. You can't, if you don't have $1,000 right in the bank and you can't see a way of getting it, that then you can't support, say, other organizations' fundraising initiatives. Say if they want a sponsorship in their ad booklet or something like that. So you need to be well informed as to what is actually available to you. And then also, and that means also actually looking back at historical information and then actually making some sort of forecast based on that historical information to help you to be informed. And then having a budget, it helps you to maintain your compliance. So, part of your year-end processes or part of the financial team's year-end processes should be, actually it's part of the monthly process, but at year-end, there should be just an overall budget to actual process. And then part of filing some of the tax returns and is actually being able to have access to those final year-end financial statements. So that helps you to make sure that you're complying with any federal, local requirements in your community. And then sustainability, you want to make sure, again, we just celebrated another Founders Day, and you want to make sure that you're set up for the long game, right? You want to make sure that your chapter is healthy. And part of being healthy is making sure that that you've allocated the resources, right? You've actually done the analysis. You've actually made sure that you're collecting enough in revenue, which includes mostly chapter dues, and you've considered any other resources that might help your chapter. You want to make sure that you set yourself up, and then you want to also make sure that you haven't set yourself up with having too many expenses that aren't offset by the revenues. All right. So the next is the who. So who prepares? I think we know this, but again, we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. I use this slide a lot in my presentations. I always like to just basically let people know, because I know when I first became a financial officer, it seemed like there was a lot of confusion into what the responsibilities were in regards to the Tamias and the Tamias Grammatias. And so on this slide, you'll see that I'm highlighting that the Tamias is typically the chairperson of the budget committee. Now, I'll say this might be different for your chapter, and because I know people have chapters have different bylaws. They may have it where the budget chair might be a different person than the Tamias. But I wanted to just present this like this because this is the typical responsibility of the Tamias or the treasurer of the chapter, is to serve as the budget person, the budget chairperson. And then the Tamias Grammatis. Again, I like to make sure that we understand what the role is and the responsibility is for the Tamias Grammatias. And you'll see here is that typically she serves on the budget committee. And this makes sense just because the Tamias Grammatias is the one that's collecting all the revenue. She should understand what the membership count is. She should understand what went into the fundraising, right? What revenues were collecting in the fundraising. She should understand across the board because she's doing all the reporting. She should be reporting monthly to the chapter. She should be reporting at year end on what occurred in regards to any revenues collected, in particular the membership. And so she should be very helpful as part of the overall budgeting process. All right. And so then just kind of going back over this again. Again, we talked about the Tamias, who's typically the chair. You may have somebody else if that's something that's outlined in your bylaws. Typically, a Tamias Grammatis would be included. Past financial officers, even if they're not even on the committee, you may want to inquire with them, especially if you're a new financial officer, and because they probably can provide some clarity to why something was done a certain way, or what are their thoughts on, how you should be budgeting. You may want to consider a boule year different from an off boule year. Those kind of things. And so typically someone that's already served in those roles, they can be very helpful. Then you want to look at potential financial officers. And I'll say for myself, that's what happened to me. I was voluntold in my chapter to start participating in these types of committees. And this is helpful because that way, when you do eventually become a financial officer, you're pretty familiar with what goes into the budgeting process. Also, you may want to work with professionals that are in your chapter. They may not be able to be a chapter officer, but they might be able to serve on your committee. And having someone that has professional experience, especially in the budgeting area or month-end closes, that type of thing, that are used to doing these types of comparisons, that could be helpful. Even if they can't be an officer, they can probably provide you some assistance in how to best to report and analyze this information. And then another one, I didn't put it on the slide, is that you might want to consider just regular SORAs. And I'll tell you that for me, it's good to have SORAs that don't even have finance experience. And I'll tell you why. It's because I'm an accountant. I'm a nerd, I like to say. But SORAs that don't do accounting, they actually kind of keep me in check, because it makes me it helps me to make sure that I don't get too technical about things. It helps me to make sure that I break things down so that everybody can understand. And so it's always good to make sure that you can communicate finance information to just the regular person, to the regular SOAR, and that you fully understand and you're able to explain it to them in just layman's terms so that everybody understands. And that's part of the transparency. So it's always good to have somebody on your committee that maybe might not have a finance background. All right. So what's needed to prepare your budget? All right. So when it comes to preparing your budget, you want to make sure that you collect quite a bit of information. And so you'll remember that I was talking about uh, the financial officers. They should be providing the chapter with year-end information. The TAMIUS Grammatius, I hope that they're providing your chapters with monthly information at your chapter meetings. Typically, they provide monthly information at the executive board meetings. But they also should be providing that information at year end. And the reason why they should is that you should be providing your information, but they need that to prepare for the tax filing. They should have that information readily available so that when it's time to do the tax filing, the TAMIUS Grammatius has all of her revenue information, all of her membership information, and then the TAMIUS has her information that has the overall financial activity for your chapter. And so that's needed whether or not you file in a 990 postcard, because you need to prove out that you didn't meet that threshold in regards to filing an actual 990 EZ or 990. And it's necessary, obviously, so that you can file a 990 EZ or 990. And one of the reasons why I say that is that part of filing the 990s, you have to basically say that you did provide that information to the members of your organization. And so part of doing that is making sure that you provide those financial statements and provide the 990, which is a public document. You want to make sure that you've obtained all of the regional, international, regional, or state fee charts. And typically, that's going to be your financial secretary anyway. She should be the one that's working in ZMS. If you don't have a TAMIUS Grammatius, it's going to be your TAMIUS. But that person should have that information and understand what is going to be required as far as the fees that are due for the chapter as well as the individual SOAR. Again, you want to take all of that into consideration as you're pulling your budget together. If y'all recall, I sent out a budget request form back in December. that you want to use that. You don't have to use the one I sent, but you might want to have one for yourself. And I was thinking, this is probably a good form for those of you that are tech savvy. Create a Google form. My region, we use member planning, so you can create a form in there as well. So create a form that's, similar to what I sent out, and then it will create an Excel spreadsheet for you with all of the submissions. So like I say, you don't have to use what I sent, but just kind of, think outside the box and maybe create a form that will actually create an efficiency for you. I just tried to create something so that SORAs and chapters could move pretty quickly if they didn't already have something in place. The next place that you want to start with is the officers and the board of directors in your chapter. They should be very aware of what's going to be happening within the next year and should be able to provide you with some information in regards to what may need to go into your budget. They may not be able to provide the dollars and cents, but they might be able to say, hey, you might want to consider this, because we were talking with Madam President and she was talking about such and such, right? So you want to keep that in mind. You want to be talking with your committee chairs, and in that budget form, though, that's one of the main places, or one of the primary members that you want to focus on in regards to sending that budget form in, because typically on your budget, you've got like lines for each committee. So you want to make sure that they have the opportunity to submit a budget form to you. And then lastly, you want to make sure that you understand the chapter goals and plans that are being formed for the next year. And that's probably going to require a discussion with the boss list, the president of your chapter. And so you want to make sure that you understand her plan. And one of the things that a lot of people, don't think about is that you have a new president that comes in. Typically, these stores have a vision of what they want to see, and that may require a change in the budgets that you've seen in the past. So you don't just say, oh, well, this was our budget last year, we're going to go with that, and this is no, you don't do that. Make sure that you're actually working with the president to understand her vision. And one thing just to think about, even if you think that something may look, a little different, at the end of the day, the chapter has to vote on it. But you want to make sure that you give the president of your chapter the opportunity to help to shape and form that budget. And if it makes sense to the chapter members and they agree with it, then you can move forward with it. Okay. All right. All right, so I wanted to put on this slide just because I wanted to make sure that we all understood um, uh, the how important it is to make sure that as part of the budgeting process that you consider some of the rules that affect our type of organization, which is a 501c7. And some of you may have a separate 501c3 nonprofit organization. So they're both nonprofits, but they operate differently. So the 501c7 is a membership organization. Everything you do is for the benefit of the members, right? And then a nonprofit, that's more of a public entity, and it can collect revenues that can be tax deductible. And so I put a QR code on the screen because I put a link directly to the Internal Revenue Service that talks about social clubs and some of the requirements. And the one thing that I wanted to make sure to highlight is that the bulk of the revenue comes from membership dues. So you want to keep that in mind. At least 65% needs to come from the collection of membership dues from your chapter members. So I know sometimes we get all happy and we have these big fundraisers, but you want to make sure that you're being careful about that you're making sure that most of the revenues are coming from your chapter members. So keep that in mind as you're pulling your budget together for your chapter. And this slide just basically says the same thing again, that QR code takes you to the IRS, and it just basically explains that a social club may receive up to 35% of its gross receipts from non-member sources, including investment income. So definitely keep that in mind. All right. So I just wanted to provide this slide just in case you hadn't seen it. This is the budget request form that I did provide back in December, and this can be used to collect the information that's necessary for your chapter so that you can pull it into the main document. Again, it's on toifortammies.com/templates. And you can access that and you can see it's a very simple form. Again, you don't have to use this. You can create your own or use what you've been using if that's been effective for you, or create a Google form, what have you. But you can see it's very simple. On here, it's got a budget line item, who prepared it, how to contact them, and then they have the opportunity to put everything that they need, or they think that they might need for their particular category or committee. And one thing that you want to keep in mind, and I think I'm going to talk about it on a few more slides, but one thing you want to keep in mind, just because somebody submits, say, a $2,000, budget request, and maybe, the year before it was $500, they need to be able to explain how you get from 500 to 2,000, right? And then, in the prior year, did they spend over 500? If they didn't, like, and if you look at the 2,000, is it, oh, we gonna have like a celebratory lunch or something after the event? Like, that's the kind of thing you're gonna be like, wait a minute, that's not what this is for, right? So this is where you, as the person that's responsible for budgeting, or compiling the budget for your chapter, you have to scrutinize what's being sent. And sometimes it's just a matter of, you have new sources and they just don't understand, like, no, we don't do that. We have to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible. So, but the expectation is that they outline exactly what they need this information for. And that's why it's important that as Tammy's, that if that person asks for, say, detail of the expenses for their particular category for the past year, you need to be able to provide that information so that they can know, what to expect in the upcoming year and budget. And the again, that's just a QR code to toifortammies.com/templates. All right, so the when. So when do you need to prepare your budget? As y'all, again, if y'all recall, what was sent out on social media was just kind of a brief outline of a suggested budget timeline. Again, you want to customize it for yourself. And so on the next slide here, you'll see here what I say here is, I say you start at the end, right? So in my chapter, typically we approve our budget in June, at the June meeting. And so, because essentially we have SOARs that just sit there waiting, like, okay, I'm ready to write my check, So, so we have to make sure that it's done in June. But you want to make sure that it's right for your chapter. So if you don't do it in June, maybe your chapter does it in March. That's great. So you just probably want to take the timeline and back into that, right? But the main thing is that, when do you need it done? When do you need to make sure that's ready? Because you may be a chapter that, some chapters actually accept dues ahead of the July 1st start of the sorority year. Some chapters do exactly like headquarters does, and they say, nope, you got to wait until July 1st. So sometimes it can depend how you work with your chapter members. So again, just start at the end and think about it, and then just kind of back into that timeline so that you can get to where you need to be, to make sure that your budget is completed in time enough for you and your chapter. So this is that timeline. So I just put a little screenshot of the social media, and then basically put a horizontal illustration of the timeline. Again, use this how you need to use it. This starts at the beginning of July, August. You may, again, if you need it in April, then you might want to kind of collapse your calendar a little bit. But the main things that you're going to start, if you're looking to do this in June, start in July and August, right at the beginning of the year, and make sure that you're recruiting the source for your committee and get started. All right, you don't want to wait until like now to be recruiting the members of your committee. Now, if you haven't done that yet, then of course you need to start recruiting like ASAP. But you want to make sure that you start at the beginning of the year so that you can get everybody on the same page. And then you want to make sure that you work together with your team, with your committee, to establish a timeline for this whole budget process, which is basically looking at this timeline and then assigning out responsibilities, and really in detail understanding, making sure that everybody's on the same page in regards to how this is going to work. Then you need to prepare a template. You can use the one I provided you again, or use what you've been using, or create a Google form or something similar to collect the data that you need. Then you want to make sure that you distribute that information you want to distribute those committee budget proposal templates. And you'll see here, again, based upon January, one of the reasons why we're doing it in January, because we realize that November, December, people are really not paying attention to what we're sending. So that's why we send it in January. And then from that point, you're going to have some stores that are going to submit it right away, and then you have some that's going to wait until the last minute. But as you get them, you want to, collect and compile that. And then you want to be very clear, and I'll have an email example on the next slide, but you want to make sure you're very clear on what it is that you need, why, and what happens when they don't get it to you. So then you want to make sure in April that you're compiling this information. You're probably going to be meeting quite a bit with the budget committee. And then you want to present that to the chapter. Again, if yours is based upon a June vote by your chapter, then you want to present that your budget at minimum by the May meeting, so that you allow your chapter enough time to be able to review what you submitted, ask any questions that they need to ask in the meeting, or maybe after the meeting, so that you have time to make any adjustments that you need to make prior to the meeting in June, so that it can go for a vote. But that's part of being transparent, so that the chapter members should feel very comfortable in having that type of discussion with you as the budget chair, and so that they get their questions asked, because at the end of the day, it's their money. So. All right. So on this slide, and hopefully you can see this, and I'll try to do a PDF of this document too, and I think that might help. But you can see this is something I did years ago, right? And so I just figured it was good to share this again. Do what you want to do, but I just want to make sure that you include what needs to be included, so that SOARs understand exactly what is needed. You want to make sure that you state the purpose of that email. Be very clear about that. It doesn't have to be long. Make sure that you include the document or the link to the form that you're sending. And then you want to be real clear about the deadline for submissions. You can see back then I was asking for it April. Trust me, and trust and believe that you need to say March, because SOARs are still probably not going to do what you tell them to do. So at least you build in a little bit of cushion. And then definitely outline the consequences of not submitting requests. I know for us, if they didn't submit anything, our attitude was just, you're going to get what you're going to get, right? So, and SOARs didn't particularly like that. If they had already had discussions with the president and knew what it is that they wanted to do for their particular committee, then they're not going to be very happy if they don't get the funds that they need to get. Okay. So how do you prepare and track your budget? So today I've actually had the opportunity to drop another template that I hope will be helpful. I'm hoping that some of these templates have been actually helpful to you. I actually appreciate feedback. If something's not helpful or something's confusing, let me know. If you need me to add something here or there, let me know, because it helps me to help you to make sure I understand what it is that you need. Okay, so here's the template that was provided today. Again, this is a link to toifortamius.com/templates. And I've got, let me pull. Let's see. When you go to the website, it should allow you to download the template. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, good. I think y'all can see it. And so here, very similar how we've submitted other templates on the website, is that you've got information, an instruction tab, and then you've got an input tab, just to make sure that it basically customizes the document for you to be able to use. And this is set up in such a way that hopefully you can use this uh, to be able to collect the data you need to collect, and then use this to present to your chapter. And then afterwards, if you don't have a software package like my chapter, I know my chapter or region, we use QuickBooks Online. I know a lot of chapters actually use that, but it's got a built-in capability for us. Once the budget is complete, we input the budget into QuickBooks Online, and then the TAMIS is then able to run budget to actual reports whenever she wants to. But if you can't do that, then I think using this might be helpful to you. I'm going to go to this next tab, but essentially, you would be able to go in here and start tracking the information as you go along. So as you build your budget, you want to make sure that you're pulling information from the prior year. And so you want to make sure that either you're pulling it from some sort of financial package for as far as all of the income and expenses are concerned. And then you should be able to start going through here and estimating what the revenues are. Again, utilizing your Tammy's Grammatis. She should know how many members are and what the estimate is in regards to members that you think you might have in the next year. Are y'all being really aggressive in regards to membership intake, right? And then, are there any, grants maybe that you're going to have? Is there a big fundraiser that y'all plan to have? That type of thing. And so she should be very helpful in that process. And then the TAMIs should be able to go through and know what the expenses are. And you'll see over to the left, these are just kind of some sample accounts. Please feel free, especially those of you that have a financial platform that you're using, like a QuickBooks Online, like with FreshBooks. If you've got already have a chart of accounts, customize this to your chart of accounts, and then basically drop that in there, and then again, present this. You should be able to present this to your chapter once you've got your budget. And you can see here at the bottom, this is a zero-based budget. You may want to have a budget that actually projects that you're going to make money, right? So you may just think about it. You might be celebrating your chartering, right, of your chapters. It's the 50th anniversary of the chartering of your chapter, and you want to start planning for that several, years in advance. Then you may want to make sure that you're making a profit so that you've got a little bit of reserve that's set up for a big celebration for your chapter. But this one, you'll see that this is a zero-based budget. But if you wanted to make sure you had $5,000 set aside, then you make sure that you have $5,000 set aside. But keep in mind, that's probably, that could potentially increase the dues for the member. So again, that's something that you've got to make sure that chapter members understand. You sometimes, when we're going through some hard times, like for instance, I guess now, but I'm just thinking about like during COVID in my chapter, one of the things that we made sure to do is that we actually, really dug in and evaluated the financial status of our chapter, and was able to actually lower the dues for chapter members, because we understood that everybody was going through a tough time. People were losing jobs during COVID. So we wanted to make sure that, chapter members felt comfortable about being able to pay the dues and be in good standing in the chapter. On this next tab, remember what I was saying in regards to being very transparent. This tab is set up, and this is typically what my chapter does, is that as part of the budgeting process, we also provide to the chapter members at every level, right? Whether they're a regular graduate member, we have what we call Dove members in our chapter. We have life members, new graduate members, reclaim. But as we are providing that budget to them, we want them to be very clear on what their financial obligation will be if they approve this budget. So that's what this is. It's just a summary of by by member type of what it's going to cost. So you can see here, we even included like what their international dues are, what their state dues are, what their regional dues are, and then also what what the late fees could be, and then so that they had a total understanding. Says now we pay it all, we pay it, we don't pay it all in one lump sum to the chapter, but then also that they understand what they're gonna pay the chapter. Right. So because what's going to be in the actual budget is going to be this chapter local, but they need to understand what they need to pay in total. So that's part of being transparent. And then for this tab was provided in here is just to make it a little bit easier because again, we understand that everybody may not have like a financial program that they can utilize. This may be a new chapter, maybe an undergraduate chapter. This is just basically a quick and dirty way for you to kind of compile your budget. If anything, you should understand kind of like when you expect people to typically pay their dues, and then any other revenues that may come in, and then how you typically pay your bills, right? So this is not meant to be accurate at all. It's just an example, but hopefully this is a way for you to easily just put in by month what you think your budget needs to be, and then you can use that to drop into the annual budget tab. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay. All right. All right, so just some other notes to include in regards to the budgeting process. So once you've gone through your budgeting process and you approved it, they're estimates and it shouldn't be changed. But but because a budget is, it is an estimate. The way you can change it is you can actually bring it to the body, right? You realize that you really have an important, item that needs to be paid by the chapter, then you'll need to bring it forward. One of the things that is really a good idea if you have a situation like that, go to the TAMIUS, ahead of time, ahead of that meeting, and the president, and explain the situation because maybe they can find some money without having to actually try to increase the overall expenses for the chapter. So work with them because a lot of times chapters find that they didn't spend as much as they thought they were going to spend. So that's helpful instead of getting to a meeting and then you're looking around like, well, I can't tell you anything because I don't know at this point. So it's always good to give a heads up. You want to make sure that you're using, financial software if you can. And there's tools, and I'll go over it in another slide, but also use your bank statements and vouchers and all of that to help to update, the template. Again, you can use the template that I provided, or you can use your own template. And then you want to make sure that you're reporting the updates based upon your own, the guidelines of your chapter. You may have different reporting requirements, but in particular, I would think that you're doing it monthly, and that's why that last check mark says, you want to make sure that you're reconciling your data at least monthly. Because again, if somebody comes to you and says, "Well, I need this, this, and this, and I need to see if I can bring this to the chapter for a vote," then the TAMIS needs to be prepared to have that information so that you can make an intelligent decision about the matter. Um, this slide, I'm not going to really go over. This is just really, again, just illustrating the point of being very transparent. I know in my chapter, we make sure that in our member planet, we include something similar like this so that SOARs can go in there and see exactly what they're paying for. So once we approve the budget, then we update all of our information, and that's sent out to the chapter. So again, we're being very transparent to our members in regards to what their obligation is to Zeta. This one is just as a reminder, in this day and age, I know I've mentioned, if you don't have some sort of financial software, use Excel spreadsheet. But in this day and age, I would encourage you to try to explore using some sort of tool in your chapter, even if you're small. One of the tools I know I worked with some of the chapters in my region is a tool called Wave Accounting. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but it will get you what you need for free, right? Just so you can do the reporting that you need to do. It's online. You don't have to update any software. It's free. You can actually even provide receipts, electronic receipts. So, but then there's other tools. Like I said, there's QuickBooks, FreshBooks. So there's tools, and so this helps in regards to automating some of your reporting. So and which helps to reduce them, any mistakes. And then this is good for succession planning because I'll tell you, most times SORAs, especially some of the younger SORAs, they're used to using more technology. So you want to encourage that. Um, and on here, and I just always like to include this because one of the things that we want to make sure of is that we might be a sisterhood source, but we are a business and we should operate like a business. And so that's one of the reasons why I try to stress, using software as part of your financial process. So if you're not doing it, just use this as a moment to start exploring some options for your chapter. Another thing that I encourage sorors to do, just like the chapter Tamius and Tamius Grammatis would work together in regards to the budget process, then it's also helpful for them to actually work in the same software package. I know in QuickBooks Online, it has a whole audit trail, right? And then you can actually um, determine what type of access people have, based upon the roles they're assigned. So the Tamias Grammatius probably wouldn't need as much access as Tamias, right? She would only need to be able to input any sales receipts, which is probably associated with membership dues, and anything that y'all, say a fundraiser or something that y'all collected funds on. And then you want to eliminate paper receipts, right? This helps you because you just think about when you're trying to uh, go through the whole budgeting process. The last thing you want to do is be able to is have to go through paper receipts. It's going to be easier for you if you set up a more electronic virtual system. And so encourage you to use, like a Google Drive, Dropbox, something like that, OneDrive, something like that, so that you have what you need at your fingertips instead of having to go through boxes and notebooks of information. Because I'll tell you this, when I was Tammy, that was one thing that I did. I got rid of that. I to my horror, I collected so much paper. I did not want to do that to the person behind me. So we started using the electronic filing system after that. All right. So and many of y'all know this, and a good Zeta is a well-informed Zeta. And I like to say, one of the things that you want to be informed about is your finances, and you want to make sure that you're informing your chapter members about the finances in their chapter. And again, I want to stress transparency. I want to stress allowing sorors to be able to ask questions about what is being presented in regards to the budget, because we have to remember it's their money, right? It's their money that they're investing into the chapter. So we want to make sure that everybody is comfortable in regards to what they're paying, and that they're comfortable with what the chapter is paying that's going into the calculation of their annual due. So so you want to make sure that you're doing your part to make sure that each SOAR in your chapter is a well-informed Zeta in regards to their finances. All right. So I think we did good considering, when we started, I didn't want to keep you that long, but I wanted to just see if there were any questions in the chat. I'm not sure if I'm gonna look and see if I see anything. I know there were a couple of questions prior to the Toy Talks, but was there any questions? I was going to look real quick to see if I saw anything. And I appreciate y'all that have stayed for the long haul. I appreciate it. Definitely share with others. I don't think I see anything. Hopefully this was beneficial to you. I'm gonna go to the next slide. That's really all that I have. Feel free. This live should be recorded in the Toy for Tamia's private Facebook group. And so feel free to watch again and include any comments. And I'm more than happy to come back and answer any questions that you might have. Feel free to share. For right now, this will be housed in the Facebook group until we have to archive it. And at that point, we'll move it. But for right now, that's all I have. But I definitely appreciate each of you that have attended the Toy Talks tonight. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. So that's all I got. So if that's it, then I'm just going to say good night and God bless each of you. If you're still in the cold, stay warm. I'm actually in Dallas now, and it's actually good weather. So this is the weather I'm used to. So, but I pray for each of you that are still in the cold. So hopefully it'll warm up for you soon. But God bless each and every one of you. And hopefully I'll see some of y'all soon. I'm planning on heading out to a few conferences in the next few weeks. So hopefully I'll see some of you soon. So anyway, that's all I got. God bless you.
Good job, Toy.